Welcome back to the Leverage Podcast, where our goal is simple: to learn from the best and discover how we can all live a better life, build a more fruitful business, and be more productive. Join us each week as we interview fellow entrepreneurs, thought leaders, and leading experts to discuss everything from marketing secrets to new technology and life as an entrepreneur.
In today's episode, I sit down with my good friend Jim Dew from DewWealth.com. Jim and I have been friends for a number of years. We met actually at Joe Polish's Genius Network event about 5 years ago, and we've just stayed good friends. And in this episode, we go deep into, if you're an entrepreneur or business owner, what are some of the things you should be thinking about in terms of your finances, and what are some of the government programs that you could take advantage of right now, like the PPP, so that you come out of this ahead. If you're interested and you like this episode, two things that I would love for you to do. First, please feel free to rate, review, and share the podcast. We're always looking to grow the audience. And second, we've launched a free Facebook group. The easiest way to find that group is if you just go in your browser and you go to remote.getleverage.com. That will bring you straight to it. But the name of the Facebook group is called Making Remote Work Actually Work. So feel free to go over there. All these episodes, we live stream them to the Facebook group. So it's a really good opportunity if you like the people that I'm interviewing and you like the content. It's a great opportunity to watch some of these interviews live, and you have the opportunity to ask questions that I can ask the guests in real time. Hope everyone is staying safe and healthy during these crazy times, and I hope you enjoy. Welcome back to the Leverage Podcast. Today's guest is my good friend, Jim Dew. We met through Joe Polish at Genius Network. Jim is a personal friend of mine, someone that I highly respect when it comes to financial advising. He's really a genius when it comes to this stuff. He's also a client of Leverage and just an all-around awesome human being. Jim has a master's degree in, is it tax or business? MBA?
MBA.
An MBA from ASU. I'm just doing this off the top of my head, but
yeah,
I know that
worries.
you studied math. So I remember we had that in common.
Yes.
And you've been doing this for a few decades now, right? Financial advising, managing money for some high-level entrepreneurs. And I wanted to bring you on today because there's so much going on, obviously, with the coronavirus. There's things, I've heard you give a lot of talks, and I've really liked a lot of the advice I've taken out of those talks. And I wanted to share it with our audience here, and also with all the things that are changing legislation-wise with the CARE Act. I was literally texting you a few days ago, asking you questions. I'm like, hey, I'm sure that I'm not the only person to have questions here. So why don't I just get some free advice and put it into a podcast? So that's how we're here.
Yeah, perfect. I'm excited to be here. It's going to be fun, and hopefully I'll share some ideas that some of your listeners will get value out of.
What are you seeing from your perspective? I mean, you're managing a lot of people's money. Stock market has gotten crushed the last few weeks. Like, what are you seeing, or what are conversations like right now with your clients?
We work with entrepreneurs, and so we have a lot of entrepreneurs where we manage no money for them, either because they invest in real estate, or they have their own person that does that, or they do it themselves, or all their money's back in their business. So they're just growing their business for a future exit, or to get to a point where they can spend money out of their company. So we have lots of conversations that have nothing to do with the stock market. And I'm seeing stuff across the board. So I'm seeing entrepreneurs that are absolutely killing it, if they're in the health space, if they're in the online space. And then I'm seeing entrepreneurs of ours who are really struggling. You know, we have some clients in the hospitality space who are really hurting right now. And then, of course, when it comes to investing, on that particular question, I think that it's important to have a good strategy, both in real estate, private equity, stocks and bonds. And this is a time when you rely on your strategy and your philosophy. And if you don't have one, it becomes a really challenging time for that. There are entrepreneurs who have a lot of money invested who are nervous. There are entrepreneurs who have a lot of cash who want to take advantage. And I think right now, and probably over the next 3 to 6 months, is a pretty good time to be buying into stocks in the stock market. Now, you want to do that in a thoughtful way. I have some entrepreneurs who all of a sudden have never bought individual stocks before, and they're becoming stock experts in the last, 3 weeks. They're telling me how they're buying American Airlines because it can't fail, and they're going to buy Marriott hotels. They're going to buy the, Royal Caribbean, and they're going to get rich off this stuff. And I always say, look, if you're an expert in picking stocks and you've been doing that a long time, even if it's for your own portfolio, this is a great time. If you're not, don't think you're a stock expert and that it's so obvious, because no one has some secret about American Airlines that you know that nobody else knows about what's coming or what's going on. So I would rather see people invest, for the long term in something that's diversified using things like low cost index exposure. But whatever the plan is, and really this has to be looked at, investing has to be looked at through the lens of your values, your goals, and your important relationships. Because for one entrepreneur, investing in the stock market over the next 3 to 6 months could be a really brilliant idea if they don't need that money for a period of years. Or if their values, goals, and important relationships are different, that might be a really bad idea. Or if they need the cash to run their business or to survive.
Yeah, well, I mean, I was a trader for 8 years, so I have a deep appreciation for the fact that no one has an edge in the stock market unless you have literally tens of millions of dollars worth of infrastructure, and still it's difficult. So I hear you. I have friends call me up like, "Oh, I'm this genius. I just made a few $100,000." I'm like, "Oh, that's great. You got lucky in the casino today."
Exactly. Yeah,
but there must be so much strategy right now from a tax perspective. I know with the legislation, how you can go back and adjust previous year's taxes with net operating losses. Even like there must be a lot of strategy now taking capital loss on positions you had with stocks to offset capital gains. So I'm sure that those are the types of things that you're strategizing with your clients right now.
Yeah, let's spend a second on NOLs and net operating losses, because that was a big part of the CARES Act that's not being talked about as much. Everyone's talking about the PPP, the Paycheck Protection Program loans, which are great opportunities for the right entrepreneurs. But let's talk for a second about the NOL. So it used to be you could carry back net operating losses, but then in the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017, remember that was passed in December 2017 and applied to tax years 2018 and 2019, they did away with that. They said you can only carry forward net operating losses. So the CARES Act reversed that. So now you can carry net operating losses back. What does that mean to the entrepreneur? Let's say you had a gain in 2018, but you had a net operating loss in 2019. Well, today what you could do is go to your accountant and you could go back with that net operating loss and pull back money you paid in taxes in 2018 and get a refund right now. There's actually a abbreviated process, a short form, where you could get money back really quickly. So you don't even have to wait to file your returns. Just get a net operating loss from 2019 applied to 2018.
And when you say net operating loss, is that just loss, or is that one line item of a type of loss?
It's a type of loss. It has to come from the operation of your business. So it can't be, I sold a stock and took a loss. That's not a net operating loss. But there's ways you can actually create net operating losses. So let's say you didn't have any losses the last 2 years.
Now we're talking.
This year, right, you're going to have some losses. And this is probably a more likely scenario. So let's say you say, I'm already going to have some losses, but you're in a good cash position. You could actually double down on the losses. So one thing you could do is you could, for example, buy things for your company if it qualifies for the bonus depreciation. So you can increase the net operating losses, write 100% of that off, and then use that for net operating loss for your 2020 tax return. Or another idea, let's say you have a building. You could do a cost segregation study to accelerate the depreciation this year to add to your net operating losses for 2020. Now, when you file your 2020 taxes next year, you can go back to 2019 and 2018 and pull taxes back that you paid in those 2 years because of those net operating losses in 2020. So there's ways to get money from the tax bill that really has nothing to do with getting loans through the SBA or through your banker.
Yeah, I talked to my accountant about NOLs, but she thought that there wasn't. I don't know if she just isn't being creative enough, but do you feel like there's a lot of companies could benefit from this, and it's just about being a bit creative and obviously not doing anything unethical or illegal, but the things that you just said that probably most people aren't thinking about that. So do you think that this is something that could potentially help a lot of businesses and they're just not thinking about it enough?
Absolutely. And I think there's kind of three things. I call it the AAA in any financial matter, but especially in taxes. The first is acceptance. And so if you're going to have losses this year, you have to accept that. The next is awareness. So really, what's going on? How many losses am I going to have? And then the third thing is action, which might be, hey, how can I, if I'm already going to buy these things for my business, or if I already have a building and can do a cost segregation study to accelerate depreciation, I have this opportunity to pull back taxes I paid to the government in 2018 and 2019 that I didn't have up until about a week ago when this was signed into law.
Wasn't there also some, I read quite a bit about the CARES Act this last week. Isn't there something about interest expense was 30% deductible, now it's 50%, and there's some other nuances like that? Absolutely, yeah.
There's increase to that. There's increase with, how much you can actually make in charitable deductions based on a percentage of AGI. There's a bunch of little nuances like that in the law. And one thing I just want to say, just for the call for everybody, this is an 800 and some page document. And even
it's a good toilet read. I printed it out. It's right next to my toilet.
Well, I guess if you don't have toilet paper, that's the second best thing, right?
Well, yeah, it just forces you to read it quickly.
Right, exactly. But at any rate, all joking aside, so make sure you're talking to your accountant, your attorney, your banker, and your financial advisor. And this stuff changes quickly. I did a podcast last Sunday, and there are things I said in that podcast that were in the law. They're in the law, but the U.S. Treasury came out with guidance on Thursday night and changed some of those things.
Yeah, I know that hurt me with 1099, how 1099s are treated with the triple P stuff, right?
Right. Yeah, they made it very clear on Thursday evening. There was controversy before that. I heard both things from experts, but now it's pretty clear.
Let's talk about some of these loans that people can apply to. So I have two companies. One's an LLC, that I'm the only person in it. And then I have Leverage, which is a C Corp. So I applied for that EIDL disaster 10K. Apparently I was told I was going to get something in the mail, some email, or I was supposed to get the check 72 hours after, they were saying. I've got nothing for either of these, and it's more than 72 hours. So do you have any clients that have gotten money yet, or do you have any insight into that?
No, I just have the insight that it's not coming in 72 hours. They say that on the website and everything else, but I haven't seen people get it in 72 hours.
Do you think that there's a risk that they don't even give you 10K because it's oversubscribed?
There could be. I mean, with all of these things, there could be that risk. I know with the PPP, there's $349 billion, but they're saying when it's gone unless the government decides to do another stimulus package on top of that. One thing on the 10K you should know, and you may know this, if you get forgiveness on the PPP, that 10,000 counts toward that forgiveness. You can't get forgiveness on the 10 plus the full forgiveness on the PPP. So you're going to get those combined. You're not going to get both of those.
Well, do you think that people need to worry about the forgiveness right now? Or should they just really be focused, get the cash at a cheap interest rate, and if you get forgiveness, deal with that later, but just get cash flow?
I would say yes, although you just want to be prepared, because when you get the loan, that 8 week starts right away, and you want to make sure you know what you can spend that on, because you can get the loan for payroll, and we can talk about what that means, but you can get forgiveness for payroll and for other things like rent, utilities, mortgage interest expense for the business.
For a company like mine, would software expenses be considered a utility? Because we pay like 10K a month in software, between Slack and Asana and Dropbox. I mean, it adds up to like 8 to 10K. Is that in this day and age considered a utility?
I would say no, but again, that would be something you'd want to talk to a tax expert about. I would say what would count is internet. You're paying for Wi-Fi and internet services. That would count for a utility. I don't think software is going to count for a utility, but it depends on how much you want to push the envelope. But I don't think under the law, as I read it, that would count. One other thing I do want to mention in the forgiveness is that in the U.S. Treasury guidance that came out Thursday night, they were very clear that you can't use more than 25% of things other than payroll for forgiveness. So in other words, to put it another way, 75% of what you use the money for forgiveness has to be payroll, because the spirit of the bill is to keep people employed, not to help you pay your rent.
For the calculation of triple P, so you're saying Thursday night they said contractors or subcontractors, they can apply individually by themselves, right? But it's just
Correct.
that the employer can't apply.
Yeah, so, by the way, the independent contractors can't apply till the 10th.
Right.
The other business owners could apply yesterday. Obviously not if you're a Bank of America or Chase. They said they weren't taking applications yesterday, but that's the day officially that was opened.
Yeah, well, if you go to, I bank with Citibank, and you can't do it on Citibank. At least yesterday you can.
Yeah, my bank I've heard, we can, but
you could.
Yeah, we could, but they're working all weekend, I think. But it depends on the bank. The big banks, I don't think they're going to start anything till Monday at the earliest.
Yeah, I think it brings up, and I've heard you talk about this, how it's good to have a bank that you owe money to and a bank that owes you money.
But I think it brings up a point that it's probably just good insurance to bank with have a few different relationships, maybe with some small banks and some bigger banks, and implement that strategy that you're talking about. But right now, I really only have a relationship with Citibank. So during this, like, I don't have a small bank I can call and say, hey, it's your buddy Nick over here. Let's do something. So I don't know. Are you suggesting people, if they don't have a relationship with more than one bank, that they should?
I do believe that. This is a great time too to bring up the concept where, what's the old thing that I think Warren Buffett used to say, that, when the tide goes out, you find out who's swimming without their swim trunks on. So this is a time to really evaluate a lot of things, both in your business and your personal life. What are the things that matter to you personally? Because, right, we're really getting tested on what we have available to us to do or who to be with, and what really matters is important. But in addition, how do you want to run your company? What are smart things you can do? So I can tell you that I feel like we're positioned for my company in a way that I learned lessons from the 2000 to 2002, helping entrepreneurs through that and my own business through that. And then the 2008 financial crisis, and then now. So every time I get lessons that I learn, and I implement those lessons over time. So one of the lessons I learned in the 2000 to 2002 timeframe was having more than one banking relationship. And as I think you heard on one of my other interviews, having one that you owe and the other one where you own, or one who owes you and one you owe them. And the reason why I like that scenario, or at least the ability to create that scenario, is, and I'll just tell a personal story. So in 2008, I actually sat on the board of directors of a bank, and I had an $800,000 line of credit at that bank. And what happened was, with all the turmoil, and remember, that was a banking crisis, that was a financial crisis. And so I was worried that banks would get scared and just close every line of credit that they had, whether there was any reason to close it or not. It turned out a lot of banks did that. So what I did is I pulled my line of credit. I pulled that $800,000, but rather than put it into the bank that I had that line of credit with, I put it at a different bank. And the next time I was at a board meeting, which was about a week later, the chief credit officer was a good friend of mine, still is. I saw him, and before the meeting started, he came up to me and he said, hey, I saw you pulled your $800,000 line. And I said, yeah. And he goes, where'd you put that? And I smiled and I said, wouldn't you like to know? And we laughed about it, because the truth was, he knew he wanted it at the bank, at the same bank, because in a pinch, he could grab that collateral. But when it's at another bank, now he's got to work with me. And that way I had the position where I have the cash for emergencies. And now I can tell him, if I fall on hard times, I'll tell you what, let's work out a payment plan. I'll pay you over 10 years, or I'll pay interest only. And he's going to work with me because he doesn't want to lose the 800 grand, but he can't grab the 800 grand.
Yeah.
Luckily, I didn't need the money. So a couple of years later, I paid the interest, and then I paid off the loan when things looked better. So I really believe you need to have two banking relationships at least, so that the bank you owe doesn't also have your assets that they could grab onto if there's a problem that goes deeper than you anticipate.
I heard that, and I think it's super, super smart. I went a couple of weeks ago to the bank and just pulled some cash out just to have cash on hand, just in case like the apocalypse happens and people start looting and stealing and the ATMs don't have money anymore. I mean, are you sitting on more cash right now than normal, just physically at home?
I'm not. That's not a concern of mine. The banks are well capitalized. I think that the dramatic move by our government shows that they're not going to let things get haywire. And it's kind of interesting if you think about our government, because in the 1930s, the Great Depression, one reason why Bernanke, when he was in the Fed, took some pretty severe dramatic action in 2008 is because he's one of the smartest guys about the Great Depression. He's studied.
Yeah, he's a student of the Great Depression.
Yeah, and in the Great Depression, the Federal Reserve did nothing. They did nothing, and the company just was in the tank. And my grandfather was out of work for 7 years during the Great Depression. He dug ditches for the WPA, for FDR's plan for the 25% of Americans who were unemployed, and lost 2 homes and had trouble putting food on the table. So that's part of my family history is that.
Wow.
Well, in 2008, Bernanke said, we're not going to do that. But remember, they didn't move right away, because remember, Bear Stearns failed, then Lehman Brothers failed, and then AIG failed. And when AIG failed, all of a sudden they said, we can't let these big companies fail anymore, because those dominoes are falling and it might get far beyond. This has even been more dramatic for this situation. I mean, the government has stepped up. I mean, this bill we're talking about, this CARES Act, is $2.2 trillion, right? Yeah. So It's massive, and they're jumping in with both feet. So that gives me some confidence. But long answer to your question, we have clients that I say, hey, if it makes you feel better to have 10 grand cash in your mattress, that's fine. For me, I worry about, that someone comes in to clean my house and they somehow find my cash, or, someone, I don't know. I'm not worried about it personally.
Yeah, I had an interesting interview with the assistant dean of Berkeley's business school, Linda Kreitzman, and Jay Abraham, the three of us. It's on, if you're listening to this and you want to listen to that conversation, just go on iTunes to the Leverage podcast. But Linda was pointing out how this is an economic crisis versus in 2008, it was a financial crisis, right? And if you even compare this to the Great Depression, what has happened in the last month, I don't think even the Great Depression didn't get the amount of sheer shock to the economy in a short period of time, I think is unprecedented. I think that right now it's on pace to hit GDP annualized at a minus 5%, but they're predicting it could be minus 20% by the end of next quarter annualized impact. So I think and I was a trader during the financial crisis, but this is really just a whole other animal, it seems just because how quick it is. And also it's one thing for the stock market to get hit, but once it starts trickling into the credit markets, that's really where you start getting economic impact, right? Because financial markets, only the top 10% rich people are really exposed to that. But credit markets, everyone's exposed to that. So this is really an interesting animal that we're about to.
It is, yeah. So just to put it in perspective, the worst drop in GDP since World War II was fourth quarter 2008. And I might get this a little bit wrong, but GDP dropped by about 8.7% in that one quarter. And as you kind of alluded to, the projections I'm seeing for second quarter 2020 is 10 to 15% drop. So it'll be the worst quarter. I would guess it's going to be the worst economic quarter since World War II for America. That being said, as long as we get through the health crisis, which is really the reason for the economic crisis, then most experts I study believe that the bounce back is going to be way faster than we saw in 2008. And it makes sense because a lot of these layoffs, furloughs, and firings, or however you want to say, people be getting laid off and losing their jobs, a lot of these are hospitality that can hire them back very quickly. So for example, if you close your restaurant, which most restaurants had to let go of all their employees, you can start back up as soon as everyone can go out and have dinner again. You can start up in a matter of a couple of days, and you have no lack of resources as far as employees. You can hire people back very quickly. So most of the experts believe that, second quarter, assuming that this shut-in stuff is going to be over here in a month or two, the rebound should be pretty dramatic economically, and nothing's broken. It's just people are locked into their house. And with the money that's going out through the $1,200 and $2,400 checks and through some of these loans and some of the other ways they're getting money in pockets to unemployment, the extra $600 a week, there's going to be money to spend. And I think people are going to be chomping at the bit to spend money. So I think we'll see the recovery, whether it's near the end of this year or 2021, will be pretty dramatic on the other way coming back up.
Yeah, no, I hope so. That brings up a few other points. When are we supposed to get this $1,200 check?
Yeah, that's an interesting thing. They want to get it out fast, but of course, fast and government are usually, that's an oxymoron, right? And originally they were saying you had to show a tax return that was filed, and that got a bunch of heat from people. And so now it's just really like proving you have your social security number. And just to delve into that a little bit, I don't know when they're going to get that money, hopefully within the next, few weeks. And the way it works is if you made $75,000 or less adjusted gross income, if you're single, then you qualify for a $1,200 check. If it's married filing jointly and it's below $150,000, you qualify for a $2,400 check, and you get $500 per child under age 17. That's not 17 or under age 17. So up to 16 years old, you get a $500 check, and then that phases out at $5 for every $100 over that. So just to put some numbers to that, the single $1,200 check would phase out at $99,000. The married filing jointly $2,400 check would phase out at $198,000 married filing jointly adjusted gross income. And then you can do kind of the math on the $500 per kid. So that will help a lot of Americans, and that'll put money in their pocket. And Americans are terrible savers. So I would expect that money is going to turn around as soon as they lift the stays. That's going to go out into the economy.
Gotcha.
One other thing I should mention, just for anyone on the call who has kids who have student loans, or if you have a student loan yourself, there's a respite, so you don't have to make any student loan payments. No interest is accrued from now until September 30th. Some people know that, but they just assume it's going to happen automatically. There is no money fairy who's going to stop that for you. You have to go to your plan provider, to whoever has the loan, and tell them you want to stop payments. So that can actually save some people some money from now until September 30th. Anyway, there's
you could probably even call like your credit card companies or your landlord, or like a lot of people that you're paying money to, and try to work with them. No?
You could. And one thing I tell people, and let's use the landlord example. So it's important, and back to those 3 A's I used: acceptance, awareness, and action. You want to know if you're trying to work with someone to get a better deal for whatever reason, like your landlord, you want to know their position and your position. So for example, if their position is they have no money, or they're having a lot of people not pay them, and your position is you do have a lot of money, then rather just go in there and say, like most people would, I want 3 months free rent. And of course, on the surface, I'm seeing a lot of entrepreneurs talk about this, like you just go strong arm them, and they're going to do whatever you want. Well, landlords are going to have their own way of trying to prevent that from happening as well. It's not just as easy as give me 3 months free. But in that scenario, one of the keys to any of these things is the relationship. If that landlord can help you or hurt you in the future, you may not want to step on their neck while they're really hurting. Right?
No, I wasn't suggesting to hurt them, but like, just how can we work together here on this? It's not, everyone's suffering. So,
right. So let me give you an example. Let's say you went to your landlord and you knew you had cash and they were suffering, and you could go to them and say, I want 3 months free rent. So let's say you pay $100,000 in a rent a year. That's $8,333 a month. So you say, give me 3 months rent. If you do the math on that, that's $25,000 or 25% off the year's rent. What if instead you went to that landlord who's struggling and said, hey, you're struggling. Why don't we do this? I'll pay you $70,000. So I'll pay you the next 12 months rent today. So that gives them cash. So they're like, oh, that's really helpful. And guess what?
Yeah, but that covers the year.
That covers the year. But now instead of a 25% savings, you got a 30% savings, and the relationship is stronger because they feel like you work together to get a good solution.
Totally. So, or it's like, give me 3 months off, but I'll sign a 3-year lease or something like that. And you can lock me in for 3 years. So you can be creative with those things.
Yeah. Jason Kaiser, who's a very smart real estate guy, calls that blend and extend. So you can say, hey, I'll pay you less, or give me 3 months free, or give me a lower rate. Or as I said, if they're struggling, say, I'll extend my lease, but I'll pay the same now, but I want you to tier me down in future years, right? If they need the money now. If they don't need the money now, hey, lower me if you need the money, and I'll tier up in future years when you're in a better position to pay higher. So there's blend and extend, or there's, what they call abatement, which you just want to be careful you don't burn bridges.
Yeah, no, I think that's great advice. Can we go back to the specifics of CARE Act, just to be selfish, because I wanted to get the advice anyway. So sure. I'm just going to use this as free consulting. So my scenario, I have an LLC and I have a C Corp. Yeah. So I applied for the EIDL on both. Now let's take the LLC. I don't have anyone that works for me. It's just my business efficiency consulting. Right now, it's just me that does that. Can I file for PPP on that one and claim that I don't have formal payroll, but I was hearing mixed messages that with PPP, it's not just, I know the 1099s you were saying you don't qualify, W-2s do qualify, but what happens if you're an owner of the business, but you're not on payroll? Does that qualify for PPP?
Yeah, that's a good question. And really your
Yeah.
compensation up to $100,000, you can't take over $100,000, should apply,
So at the very, very least, I should be able to claim a bit more than $8,000 a month for just myself for that company, even though I'm not taking a formal salary.
The way I read it, yes. Cool. And again, you want to talk to your U.S. bank person too, but that's the way I read it.
So very worst, if you're a business owner listening to this right now and you're a single person LLC or something, some simple setup, the very least you should be able to qualify for 2.5 times 8, so $20K loan in the PPP. May or may not be forgivable, but you should have access to that.
Yeah, and it would be forgivable, if you use it for the payroll for you, right? But payroll includes other types of compensation, so it doesn't have to be official, through a payroll company. But yeah, you can. There's nothing in the law that says it can't be paying you, right?
Okay.
So even as an owner, your pay counts toward that.
So what should we be thinking about with this EIDL? Because when I applied for the EIDL, there was literally nothing. It asked you almost anything. There wasn't anything about how much do you want to be. It was just very, very basic. And my thought was, or the impression I got was, you fill this out, you get an immediate check for $10K, and then next steps will be provided in the future in terms of what's your credit score, what do you need it for? Is that right? Like people that applied for EIDL now are just waiting to get the check and waiting to discuss how much they want?
Yeah, so I haven't personally gone through that process, but I would say that, you apply for the 10, but I would apply for more for the EIDL. And with the EIDL, other than the 10, they're going to want a lot more information. What's your liquidity position? They're going to run a credit check, because in the EIDL, here's the kind of the tight wire they're trying to walk. On the one hand, they want to have reasonable belief that you're going to pay them back. But on the other hand, it's an emergency loan. So they've got to believe that you're really struggling, or your business is just positioned to go off a cliff. And they're trying to stay in between those two parameters. A couple good things about the EIDL is no personal guarantee up to $200,000. It's up to a $2 million loan, but no personal guarantee up to $200,000. And then also it's a 30-year loan at a 3.75% interest rate.
And how does that compare to other SBA loans? Like how much better are those terms than if we weren't in an economic disaster and you were just to walk into the bank and get a regular SBA loan?
See, I don't know what the rates are right now, but typically, historically, I usually see SBA loans as, 6-7%, stuff like that. Again, I'm not a banker or an SBA expert, but it's a great interest rate, 3.75. And you think about if you can use that money for all kinds of now there's certain things you got to make sure you use the money for, but if that helps you grow your business at 3.75, no prepayment penalty for 30 years, that can be a great source of capital.
I'm guessing for that, they're going to take your credit score into account, right?
They are.
So I wonder what happens. Is there a strategy to wait if you're someone that is improving your credit score? Can you apply? And if you get rejected because of credit score, is this the type of thing that you can reapply for? Or is there a strategy around waiting to get your credit score up?
I don't know the answer to that, but I think that in general, the answer is you want to apply for these things as soon as possible, because there will come a point where the government's going to go no more. Whether it's because I've heard some people go, oh, they're going to do another stimulus. And I don't know that to be true, but there will come a point where the government's not going to give any more money, whether that point is today or whether there's another stimulus. So I wouldn't wait and hope you can get your credit score up.
Is there a place where you can see how much is remaining? Because I was hearing that just Friday morning, of the $350 billion that they are allocating to PPP, that just Bank of America in day one got $6 billion worth of requests for the PPP.
I haven't seen that personally, but I know that other people have told me. So let me just say this is hearsay, but other people have told me that the U.S. Treasury has put out those numbers. So they made announcements about how much of it has been taken up. I heard 10 billion had been taken up, and it's kind of interesting. You mentioned Bank of America, and so I was talking to Mimi, my wife, who Mimi, this morning, was saying, well, wait a second, we had our banks all over it, and ours hasn't been in yet. They're working all weekend, and Chase and Bank of America and Wells Fargo said they're not taking applications on Friday. How could there be money already sent out or called for, reserved through this plan? And I said, well, think about this. It's 500 employees or less, up to a $10 million loan. So let's say you had a company that had 450 employees and had an enormous payroll. How important is that customer to Bank of America? Like hugely important compared to a company that has, 10 employees or 20 employees. And the deposits just on the normal course of business are enormous. So you can't tell me, and also those companies have a whole team of financial people, their CFO and all these people and accountants that are doing all this stuff. So you can't tell me they didn't go to their banker several days ago and go, we're at the front of the line. We want you to put our application in at 12:01 a.m. on Friday and get it done. So there is that stuff going on because, if you're a huge company, you're more important to a Bank of America than, you or I would be to a Bank of America. So that's what's going on. But yeah, I have heard there are reports of it. I've heard people guessing that, by, in a week it's going to be gone and stuff like that. And I don't know what the truth is, but I do know that you want to try to get in for these loans as soon as you can.
So is it just the PPP and EIDL are the two main ones that people should be thinking about, plus all the tax stuff that we had previously discussed?
Yes. Now there's a couple other things. If you don't do the PPP and don't get forgiveness on that, there is the Payroll Tax Credit. And to qualify for that's a little different, but just so you know that these next two ones I'm going to talk about, you can't do if you get forgiveness on the PPP. So if you feel comfortable or confident you're going to get forgiveness, you wouldn't try to do these two. But one is the payroll tax credit, and that gives you a tax credit of 50% of the wages of any employee up to $10,000 of wages per quarter. The way you qualify is twofold. Either you have a 50% or more drop in revenue, not profit, revenue in a quarter in 2020 as compared to the same quarter in 2019. So think about that. If your profit margins are 40%, you're losing money if you drop 50% revenue. So that's a huge drop in revenue. Or if your business has been partially or completely shut down due to government order, this can be local, state, or federal. So when your governor says this is a shut-in order and that partially closes down your business, you would qualify. And you qualify under both of those until either if you qualify for the 50% drop, until you're above 80% of prior revenue of the same quarter of 2019. So once you get above 80% of revenue compared to the same quarter a year ago, you don't get that anymore. If it's because you were partially or completely shut down, it's when there's an entire quarter of that shutdown being lifted that partially or completely shuts down your company. So that's the payroll tax credit. You can't get that if you're getting forgiveness on the other loan. And the other one, if you can't qualify for that, is deferring your payroll taxes. And this most everyone can get, but again, you can't double dip if you're already getting help on payroll through the PPP forgiveness. Can't do this one, but that's delaying payroll taxes that you owe in 2020. Half you can delay and pay, you still owe it, but half you can delay and pay by December 31st of 2021, and the other half you can pay by December 31st of 2022.
So with the triple P, forget about the forgiveness. Just to apply for the loan, do you have to show that you've had a decrease in revenue, or you don't have to show any change to profit? Or
so
to get the forgiveness, you have to show?
There's two parts of this question, because there's the law and there's what banks are doing. And so I can talk, about our bank. So the law says you have to certify, you have to sign something that says, because of the uncertainty caused by this pandemic, I need this loan. So if we think about that, that's the law. I don't know many business owners who couldn't say, this uncertainty, this could get so bad or so big that this loan could be my savior. So that's the language in the law is you have to attest to the fact, I need this loan because of the uncertainty caused by this pandemic. Not because I've lost any money, not because my revenue is down, not because the government's done anything to me, just the uncertainty. I need this loan because of the uncertainty. That's the law as it's written in the CARES Act. But then I see banks like our bank had us answer 3 questions they wanted in writing. And I think, and I may be wrong on this, but I think one of the questions was, what has happened in your industry or to your company that makes you feel you need this loan or something like that. So it could be the industry, right? Here's what's going on in my industry. And then the second thing I think was, what have you done to try to manage through this crisis? And I think the third thing was, what's a time frame on how you think you're going to be able to manage through this and something. And it's clear that they're doing is a CYA in case the government comes back for some reason and says, why did you loan that money to this business when they had all this liquidity and they're doing great? And they go, well, we asked them and they told us that, here's what was going on in the industry or whatever else. And so you're going to see different things from different banks. So it's hard to give advice on what you're going to see from your bank. And on the other hand, there is the law. So you're going to have to, for sure, certify that you need the loan because of the uncertainty.
The amount that you can apply for the triple P is just a function of 2.5 times your payroll. It's not the whole discussion about utilities and rent. That's just about the forgiveness calculation. That's not about the notional you can use to apply.
Absolutely correct.
Okay. Makes sense. So if leverage is primarily 1099s, not W-2s, would now be a good time to convert people? Obviously, I won't be able to apply for the triple P because they're past that period. But with the other stuff that we're talking about with the tax credits and some of these other things, would there be some tax benefit to convert certain people to full-time right now?
There could be, most definitely. Of course, now we get into the part of the law about whether someone actually should be an independent contractor or an employee. And there's been all kinds of cases in different states about this, right?
Well, let's say that their role is going to change. Their role could change, which would make them more fitting in the W-2 capacity in the future. But right now, they're doing 1099 work, but in the future they could be doing W-2 work.
Right. But I want to be careful that I want to be careful. I'm not trying to give HR law, advice or anything like that. But yeah, there could definitely be some. Now, just think about it also from the perspective of the independent contractor. Often the independent contractors qualify for the 199A 20% deduction against qualified business income that was in the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. So if they become a W-2 employee, they lose that 20% QBI deduction, or they might, depending on their financial situation. So if they have good tax counsel, they may not want to be a W-2 employee for those reasons. So there could be tax benefits to you, but there's the other side of the equation, which it may or may not be good for them to do that.
But I thought it's much more expensive. When someone becomes a W-2, you're paying payroll tax and a whole bunch of other things, right?
Yes.
That normally they would be paying some of these taxes. What's this 109Q? What was that you just said?
The 199A.
So what is
in the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act? So that's a 20% deduction against qualified business income. So what you have to do, let's say I was an independent contractor, I'd have to weigh, if I had a choice, I can become a W-2 employee and that's different, right? Or I can be an independent contractor and that's different. I'd have to look at, like you made the point that sometimes you're a W-2 employee, you don't pay certain taxes. On the other hand, if you're an independent contractor, now you get this QBI 20% deduction. You may or may not, because there's phase out ranges. There's things called qualified service business where you have limitations. So it's a complicated part of it's a complicated law, but an independent contractor would want to have their tax advisor or advisors compare and just go, which is better for you between those two? And the same thing as a business owner, you may compare. There's some reasons why you may want to have independent contractors versus W-2 employees. Certainly there's HR issues about it's easier to fire independent contractors than W-2 employees, right? So there's those kinds of things that are not as obvious. But yeah, definitely is something to think about in your business. What's better for your company?
And then independent contractors, from what I was reading, they can apply for this PPP loan. And that's why, I think that's the logic, if I'm not mistaken, why employers can't use them in the payroll calculation. It's because there could be double dipping since they can apply for themselves. Is that right?
That's exactly right. I think you should get into this business. You're pretty good at this, Nick. One other thing I'll say, though, that along those lines is the way some people were interpreting the law where you could include independent contractors, the forgiveness calculation clearly didn't involve independent contractors. It was employees or full-time equivalent, and that type of stuff. So based on that interpretation, and one of the CPA firms that I like a lot, who told me they thought in the initial bill you could use independent contracts. So I said to them, okay, but it's not in the forgiveness calculation. So you could get the loan based on the independent contractors, then fire all of them and get the forgiveness because it's not based on the independent contractors. And they said, yeah. So it didn't make sense to me at the time. And I heard both sides from different experts. And that's why I'm sure the Treasury heard that too. That's why they came out with the guidance and just said very clearly, number 2, part H of their 31-page guidance that came out Thursday night, they said you cannot use independent contractors' compensation in your calculation for the 2.5 times for your PPP loan.
So if I apply for PPP for both companies, I could include my salary in both. So I could be essentially double. If you are the owner of multiple companies, you could include up to $100K in the PPP calculation in both companies. So
you have to be really careful on that. And this is an area where I wouldn't say you should rely on me for this, because there's a lot of talk out there with bankers and with the government about affiliate rules for this kind of situation. And I would tend to say, based on what we just were talking about, that I would bet the government's not going to allow you to get a loan for your pay in 2 different companies and get it forgiven in 2 different companies. Because I know they've been very clear about the expectations of the bill, which is not letting people double dip.
But even if you don't get the forgiveness, right, isn't the interest rate so good that it's still beneficial just to get it as much as you can? It's
a 2-year loan, 1% interest, 6 months, no payments, and no prepayment penalty. It's pretty good.
Yeah, and non-recourse. I take that all day.
And non-recourse, no personal guarantee.
Yeah. Like I said, I printed it out and I just put it next to my toilet. That's how I know a little bit about this. All right, Matt. Well, how's everything going with you guys? Everything gets good? Are you going to apply for PPP and EIDL if that's not too personal of a question?
Yeah, not EIDL, because we haven't had a problem with the company yet. We are applying for the PPP because I believe, due to the uncertainty, that I need that loan. Now,
EIDL is not due to uncertainty.
EDL is, and you think in the title, right? It's called the Economic Injury Disaster Loan. So you have to show that you've got problems, or that problems are coming in a big way. Whereas the PPP, you just have to say, hey, I need this loan because of the uncertainty. And, I can paint a picture on the uncertainty, why I feel we need that loan. Right. Do I think we've done a lot of smart things in the 25 years I've been in business to know how to prepare and survive these things? Yes. But have I ever been a part of a pandemic and shut-in rules and all that stuff? No. And, could all my clients fire me? Yes. Right. So, I mean,
stock market goes down another 50%. I mean, that's not going to help business or your clients.
That's exactly right. So, I mean, there's a bunch of things going on that concern me. And anyway, that being said, that's my answer to that, but the EIDL, I don't think fits our situation. But we're telling our entrepreneurs to make their own decisions based on what are they asking you, what are the rules, and what applies to you. And we'll see. I mean, it's all, I also, for personal reasons, I wanted to do some of these myself because I'm learning a lot through going through the process. And, Mimi was working on the application for the PPP all day yesterday. And it was really amazing because our payroll company actually created a PPP report where you could click a button and it would do everything for you. But our bank created their own spreadsheet report that we had to fill out that didn't match up. So we had to take those two, or I should say we, and I'm taking credit for Mimi's work. Mimi had to get on the phone with payroll, and we had to unbundle all the stuff to pull out the right numbers to fill the spreadsheet out for the bank that they required, even though we had it already done through the payroll company. So you're going to find these kind of quirks within your bank that I would say you just got to stay on top of it. And again, if you have a personal banker relationship and you can leverage that, this is a key time and a good lesson for the future. I've had people go, I don't need a personal relationship with my bank. You really do, because you don't know when some crazy thing will happen like this. And same thing as I said before, you want to make sure that you're working together to show them, hey, I'm going to be a good client of yours in response that, I mean, we've been a very good client of our bank, even though I have more than one banking relationship, but the one that's doing the PPP, we've been nice to them. We don't yell at them when things go wrong. Like, we've worked with them in a way where they really like us, and we've been a good, profitable customer to them. So now we can leverage that and go, okay, we've been good to you. Now you got to be good to us and help us get through this.
That makes a lot of sense. And yeah, I think that having a working relationship with your banker, if it wasn't clear before how important that is, I mean, I think that people will start realizing that pretty quickly after this. Where can people find out more about you if they're interested, if they're in need right now of financial advising? How could they reach out to you? And also, where can people find out just general information about CARES Act and everything else that's relevant?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll take the second question first. So CARES Act and SBA, there's a lot of stuff on the SBA website that can be helpful. There is also, you can actually, if you have the appetite, maybe not to read the whole bill, which is more than 800 pages, but even if you read the 31-page guidance that came out from the U.S. Treasury on Thursday evening, I think that's put in language. It's not too much legalese. I think most people could get through that and get some understanding out of it. And then I would also say, if you have a really great law firm, I would lean on them, or a great CPA firm, especially if they're larger than like a 1 or 2 person shop. They have lots of experts who are really digging into this. And even if you go online to any of the large law firms, they on their websites will be posting all kinds of stuff about this. And then I always say, go to a couple different sources, because even like you mentioned, the 1099, there were different sources that I had a lot of faith in that were just disagreeing on that issue. And so I knew in my mind, the government's going to have to come out with guidance when you have very smart, established people disagreeing on something as important as 1099 compensation being included or not being included. So that's where I would go on those things. As far as finding out more about us and what we do. So we build virtual family offices for entrepreneurs. And what that means is we help them in all areas of tax, legal, insurance, and investments, and coordinating their team of professionals. So making sure that their accountant, their attorneys, their insurance agent, their investment advisors, that are all collaborating and coordinating their efforts, and that the entrepreneur isn't in the middle trying to manage all these relationships. That's kind of what we do, and our specialty is entrepreneurs who are owner-founders and are doing 1 to 20 million profit a year is kind of our sweet spot where we feel like we're strong. So companies that are already profitable and doing very well. Now, of course, 1 million profit might have been last year for entrepreneurs, because a lot of our clients who made $1 million last year won't make $1 million this year, but still need our services. That being said, to find out about us, we actually created something that we talk about entrepreneurs making rich real. And what I mean by that is make rich real means different things to different entrepreneurs, but every entrepreneur has wishes and dreams, but you want to take those wishes and dreams and make them real. So we call that make rich real. So if you go to makerichreal.com, we have a 9-question scorecard that you can download to evaluate where you are in your wealth planning. And you don't have to put in a email or anything to get that. I'm not smart enough yet to know how to build lists and do all that stuff that marketing.
We'll help you with that.
Yeah. But at any rate, you can get that without ever, connecting with us or having us hunt you down or chase you, because we're not good at that either. But there's ways, once you load that, you download that, there's ways to answer a few questions. And if you qualify, we do a strategy session with you for 30 minutes. And then, of course, our website, dowealth.com, there's stuff on there. And then my book, which is Beyond $1 Million, and that's on Amazon or anywhere else.
You got the best cover of any book that I've ever seen.
Thank you, Nick. There's some funny stuff behind that cover. But, so he's referring to my face is on the cover of my book, which when I wrote my book, I was first looking at.
It's like a modeling picture in black and white. It's what a picture.
A lot of airbrushing, I'm sure. So when we were first looking at covers, and I'm working with people helping me on the book, and they said, okay, here are some examples. And they're just showing me different books. And they showed me Tony Robbins' book, Master the Money Game. And it's got his picture right on the front, right, his face. And I said, well, the one thing I'm not going to do is have my face on the front of a book cover. I don't have an ego that big. I'm not Tony Robbins. I don't need my face on the picture. And so we kind of laughed about that. And so then they did a photo shoot for promotional stuff for the book. And then one of the people helping me with the book said, I'm going to send you a proposed book cover. Just promise me one thing. Like, what's that? I'm going to send it to you, but you cannot comment. You can't judge it. You have to sit on it for a couple of days before you say anything. I was like, okay, that's weird. And then she sent it to him. It's my face on the cover, what I said I didn't want to do. And so I went to Mimi, of course, who's my 30-year partner, as well as my business partner. And she's just so smart and so thoughtful on things. And she looked at that. She goes, let me think about that. And then the next day she said, that's the right book cover. And which is amazing, because, I don't think she married me for my looks, but it turned out really well. I like the book cover. I still get teased by people about, man, you have an ego to put your face on the book cover, but that's what it is.
I know. It's a great photo. If I had a photo that good, I would make it a book cover too. All right. Well, Mimi was spot on.
We actually had a friend who said, God, this guy's gorgeous. Like, when she picked my book up, and I said, oh, thank you. And she goes, no, not you, this guy on the cover. Like, professional photography can make people look definitely better than they really do in real life. So I fall into that.
Well, I just want to thank you for your time. This was really, really informative and critical and timely with everything that's going on. So I appreciate your time, and we'll have to do this again soon, in a couple months after things change and we have a new situation, maybe even new stimulus to talk about.
Yeah, I would love that. And probably some of the things I said today are not going to be true, because in a couple of days, the U.S. Treasury will do something different,
We'll do a correction podcast.
Yeah. But anyway, I know it's great being on there. I have a lot of respect for you, Nick, and I always appreciate our time when we have some time together. So in any way I can help people who follow you, that's good with me. I like helping people.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Leverage Podcast from GetLeverage.com. Please let us know what you think. Rate and subscribe on iTunes. Leverage is an on-demand outsourcing platform that helps small business owners and entrepreneurs scale their business. We have experts that can help set up marketing and sales funnels, your email marketing, podcasts, social media creation, paid media, and much more. Grow your business overnight with a team of experts you can trust to deliver. Accomplish more. Visit GetLeverage.com.